Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast, your favorite sports podcast where two, but sometimes three, sports lovers sit and give their hot takes.
Off the Dome.
I am Redfish.
Lionel Frankenstein here.
And I'm Rebo Hustle.
And we will be steering this ship today. Welcome back to episode 2 of our fantasy football series here, where we'll be going over the running backs. But before we get into that, we want to make sure you like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube. We upload a podcast every week, whether it be fantasy football. Once the season starts back up, we'll be all in on Louisiana sports. Saints, LSU, the Pelicans, sprinkle in some college and some fantasy along the way. And then, of course, follow the Know Network at Be In The Know. That's KNEAUX. The only way to spell it. You can see it there in the bottom left-hand corner. Make sure to follow the Know Network, as they are the people we partner with, and we are very proud and honored to do that. Great content coming over there. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Our top 10 fantasy football running backs. If you watched our quarterback episode, you'll know kind of the process of this. If not, make sure to go back and watch that one. We posted it last week where we talked about our top 10 fantasy football quarterbacks. But if you haven't watched that yet, we'll go through our top 10, and then we'll each give a sleeper as well as a player we think is being overdrafted or overrated. And those picks can be from someone on our board, someone we don't talk about at all. So we'll be able to talk about a lot of different guys here and how we feel about them. Let's go ahead and start it off. Number 1, I think it goes without saying, Christian McCaffrey. His ADP is basically 101 right now. It feels like if you're in a draft and you have the number 1 pick, Christian McCaffrey is the guy you go to. Last season with the 49ers was arguably his best year of all time, won Offensive Player of the Year. And that's for a guy who was already heralded as one of the top running backs in the league, and consistently a top 3 running back in fantasy football. So, there's not much else to say other than Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the NFL and is the best pick at the number 1 position for running back.
Yeah, there's not really any question marks. You get that kind of volume, and you're going to put up like the crazy amount of points that he does. And the format doesn't matter. He's going to catch the ball. He's going to run the ball. You got your full point PPR, your half point, or no points at all, then, he's still just going to dominate regardless.
Yeah, 8 of the other 9 guys on this list have something changed this offseason for them, whether it be an offensive coordinator, a different quarterback, different wide receivers have gotten healthy, left, things like that. Christian McCaffrey is one of those guys that you already know what he's going to do for you. It hasn't changed. He's going to get you touchdowns, whether it's probably not going to be at the clip of 1 per week or 2 per week like it was last year. But still, Christian McCaffrey is going to be a constant no matter what.
Yeah, in redraft, this seems like if you've got the 101, it seems like the easiest decision maybe since last year when it was, again, Christian McCaffrey. But quick question for y'all. What are y'all willing to give up for CMC in a dynasty draft or a dynasty league?
I know this is coming off the backs of a dynasty league you and I are in, Lionel, where CMC, I think, got traded straight up for the 101.
Yep.
If I had the 101 in a dynasty league, I guess it depends on what the rest of my team looks like. But if the rest of my team is good enough to where I feel like I'm competing, I'm trading the 101 for CMC all day. I feel like he's got this year. He's probably got a good year next year. And then he also just signed an extension. So, the 49ers are confident in his ability. He's confident in his ability. And I feel like he's really hitting his stride right now. I know he's an older running back, and once you usually hit that 30 mark, it starts to go downhill. But it feels like because of all the bumps in the road he hit earlier in his career, he may be hitting his peak at a later time than everybody else.
Yeah, the age doesn't concern you.
Not really. Because if the way I look about it is, in Dynasty, you're probably going to have roster turnover every 2 to 3 years, and if CMC can be your building block for the next 2 to 3, you've got a chance at the championship every time he's on your team.
Yeah, I don't think that I would do it if I had CMC and was just wanting the 101 in a redraft
ride
rookie.
The wheels to the
is it like a keeper or is it like a rookie dynasty?
No, just a rookie standard dynasty draft.
Yeah, there's no way. It's just
ride it till the wheels fall off.
You ride it till the wheels fall off. If you don't have a first round pick, period, maybe. But it all depends on what your team looks like in a dynasty league. But Christian McCaffrey is much like I'd rather have Christian McCaffrey for 4 years than Marvin Harrison for 8.
That's fair. Yeah.
You have any thoughts?
No, yeah. I mean, I was concerned before the extension. Just he's getting closer to that the age cliff you want to talk about. But I mean, he's proven to be an outlier. Like it's Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, who we'll get to later. Like they're just they break fantasy football or all the conventional rules.
Yeah, absolutely. While you're on a roll, why don't you go ahead and break down our number 2 prospect, Bijan Robinson?
Oh, Bijan Robinson. Talk about dynasty assets. I'm so happy to have him on my dynasty team. It's truly remarkable because I think if anyone has a chance to replicate Christian McCaffrey level of production, it's Bijan Robinson. I mean, that's been the talk all out of camp. They're trying to use him the same way they use Christian McCaffrey, and I think they have the means to do so. Bijan's incredibly talented. That's never been in question. The concern last year with the Falcons was the offense itself. I mean, you had a hodgepodge of who was back there. Desmond Ridder. You had
Taylor Heineke,
some games,
right? Yep.
And Arthur Smith just pooping in everyone's Cheerios. So now that he's gone, and Bijan can really be just like set free, doesn't really have to worry about anyone. I think Tyler Algier will still get some play, but this is Bijan Robinson's show.
Yeah, I think last year, like he even said it when he was on Busting the Boys. He said that like they were just making sure that he was getting measured reps. They weren't trying to give him more than X amount of reps on the year, so they were just trying to make sure that things went the way they were gonna go, and that's why Tyler Algier got some run later in the middle of the year there. But Bijan Robinson is by far the running back 2. I feel like there's almost a tier break, like a slight tier break between the two. And yeah, I mean, young guy that can run routes with the best of them. And Kirk Cousins has the ability to get the ball in his hands, and that's something that we haven't seen from Bijan Robinson in the NFL yet.
Yeah, I mean, Raheem Morris, although he's a defensive guy at head coach, he's coming over from the Rams, where we know a lot of people have broken off from that tree and found some success in the NFL, especially teams with really good running backs. I mean, if you think about it, Zach Taylor went to Cincinnati, used Joe Mixon as a receiving back, and although Joe Mixon isn't necessarily viewed as an elite player, he was a very big contributor on a team that ended up making the Super Bowl just a few years ago. So I really trust Bijan this year. I mean, talent might be the highest guy on our board. If you look at what Bijan can do from a football perspective, he's just a phenomenal player. He's got everything you could possibly want in a running back. Like you said, last year they kind of just limited his touches. But I think if he gets the chance to get 5 or 6 more opportunities per game this year, he'll really make a big difference for your fantasy team.
Yeah, I really hope he does because that would be awesome for my dynasty team.
True.
Yeah.
Hey, that's okay. Take us into Breece Hall.
Breece Hall is the number 3 running back. Honestly, the only question mark that separates him from Bijan is full health. Like I know he's dealing with a nagging injury right now. But when Breece Hall is healthy, he's untouchable. One of the most electric running backs in the league. We saw him even in a terrible offense in his rookie year with Zach Wilson. That offense was struggling, but Breece Hall was still finding a way to make explosive plays, and that's kind of what you're betting on with Breece Hall is the explosion.
Yeah, I remember Breece Hall coming out of the draft, and I was a really big fan of him because I thought he was one of the very few prospects you see at running back. Kind of similar to a Bijan Robinson, where not only can he run in between the tackles and put his shoulder into guys, but he's also going to catch 45, 50 passes out of the backfield. So he's very versatile. He's got power. He's got speed. He's got receiving prowess. So if Breece Hall can hit on all 3 cylinders right there, it'll be a dangerous time to play against the Jets.
Yeah, I've been on the Breece bus ever since you got on the Breece bus because I trust you and your running back takes because Lord knows I can't. So, I'm excited to see what Breece Hall does. Hopefully he stays healthy this year. Hopefully his quarterback stays healthy because I don't know if Tyrod Taylor and Breece Hall are gonna work together back there as effectively as Aaron Rodgers would, obviously.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers, whether he's 40 years old and has one leg, he still has one of the brightest minds, one of the best football IQs of all time. So he's going to understand situations and checks into runs and dumping it off when it needs to be dumped off. As much as his ego gets the best of him in his personal life, Aaron Rodgers is still a really good NFL quarterback. So
yeah, and even if Aaron Rodgers isn't like 100% or completely ready to go at the beginning of the season, I mean Tyrod Taylor is capable enough, certainly more capable than the Zach Wilson show that we saw for the last couple of years in New York. So it just obviously would be better to have Aaron Rodgers because it's Aaron Rodgers.
Without a doubt. I think, the best part about these three, which this is kind of where my tier break would be, is they don't have much behind them to challenge them. I mean, CMC has Elijah Mitchell, who might get 3 snaps a game. Although Tyler Algier is in that Falcons room, I mean, Bijan's getting the carries anywhere from 1 yard line to the other 2. He kind of brings down that touchdown perception for Bijan, but Bijan has the ability to break off 45-yard touchdown runs, so I'm not really worried there. And then Breece Hall is surrounded by a lot of other young running backs like Abanikanda out of Pittsburgh a few years ago, Braylon Allen, an absolute monster out of Wisconsin, and then they also got a 5th-round running back in Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. So, again, not really worried about the guys behind them. My number 4 guy, our number 4 guy, from my Detroit Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, when they first picked him in the NFL draft, a lot of people thought he was way too high. I really liked him as a prospect because he reminded me. I mean, he was very similar to Bijan. They were in the same draft, and a lot of people saw them differently. I thought they were kind of on the same tier. They did a lot of the same things, and you can see them pretty similar to each other right now. Jahmyr Gibbs is our number 4 guy because of the receiving prowess that he has. I mean, David Montgomery's sitting behind him, so that's kind of where that break comes in. But you saw towards the middle to end of the year, although it started off as kind of like Montgomery was the one and Gibbs came in relief, those roles kind of switched as the year went on because Gibbs was so special and so good and talented that you can't keep him off the field. And then the way the Lions talk about him, I mean, it's hard to listen to the way Dan Campbell talks about Jahmyr Gibbs or the way Jared Goff even talks about him and think that he's not in for an absolute great year.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think it would just be insanely cool to have Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs on your dynasty team? That sounds broken. Anyway, so
he keeps talking about this as if I didn't win the championship last season.
Oh,
look, they had to grow.
Spicy
they had to
meatball.
develop. Wait for this season. No, but in all seriousness, I think like we've seen what Bijan, Breece Hall, and Jahmyr Gibbs can do. I think this is the season that they just choose to dominate fantasy football. I mean, it's shown in our rankings. Obviously, they're 2, 3, and 4 for a reason. But I think like in previous years, it's been all about Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. This is the changing of the guards. It's time for the youth movement to kind of take over now. Yeah. They're going to be the new, first 3 picks in fantasy drafts moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, we kind of paired them all together at the beginning of what was fantasy football season.
Mm-hmm.
And Jahmyr Gibbs has been the guy that's sliding a little bit just because of David Montgomery being so dominant last year. And as well, he's dealing with a soft tissue injury, and that's what's kind of separated Bijan from the other 2 is his health. But, I mean, we've had Jahmyr Gibbs as high as 2 previously, so, like, the outcomes are still possible, and so that's one thing to bet on is upside with these 3 guys.
Yeah, I mean, to say it all is these first 4 guys are first-round running backs. If you were picking in the first round, and one of these running backs is on the board, it would probably be a good idea to snatch them up depending on who else is there. I think all 4 of those guys are a solidified pick. Whether you're whether it be 10-team, 12-team, 14-team, it doesn't really matter to me. I think those 4 guys are all top 10 players in fantasy football this season. So you can't really go wrong no matter who you pick there.
Yeah, so then we move back into number 5 here with Jonathan Taylor. And I honestly kind of view Jonathan Taylor and then Saquon Barkley in the same vein. I do have Taylor, my personal rankings, I've got Taylor above Barkley. It matches the rankings here, mostly just due to age. And I think at this point in their careers, Jonathan Taylor has got more in the tank. He's got more talent than Saquon Barkley does at this point. But with Taylor and Barkley, I worry about the rushing capability of their quarterback. We know Anthony Richardson's going to go out there and run everyone over on the defense. And then Jalen Hurts, when you get to Saquon Barkley, he's just the tush push. So we're going to have to deal with that. Is Saquon Barkley going to get any goal line carries, or is it just going to be tush push time? But with Jonathan Taylor, he's got a skill set that really complements fantasy football big time. Catching the ball, running everyone over. It's just going to be a great year for Taylor, I think.
Yeah, let's just break down 5 and 6 together. Saquon Barkley, number 6, Eagles. Kind of along the lines of last week, we talked about Jalen Hurts being penalized a little bit for Saquon Barkley being in the offense now. Saquon Barkley also being penalized for being paired with Jalen Hurts. Both these guys are workhorse running backs, and it just depends on how the offense views them, being their utilization is best getting the ball handed to them instead of receiving. But yeah, the difference is age. Jonathan Taylor, a little bit better receiving back.
Yeah, I think that separation between 5 and 6 really comes in the talent that's on the team. You look at the Eagles, and they have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert with Jalen Hurts throwing the ball. That's a really, really talented offense. Whereas if you look at the Colts, you have an up-and-coming guy like Anthony Richardson, which if you want to know our views on Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson, make sure to check out that quarterback video we mentioned from last week. But, you look at the Colts offense, Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman, and then, after that, they've got a new guy in A.D. Mitchell who we don't know what he's going to do on the NFL field. Josh Downs was a good player last year, but he never really got to experience play with Anthony Richardson, so how does that change? I think all in all, the talent on the Eagles team is better than the Colts team. So maybe Saquon has to take a little bit
Less
of
opportunity.
less of a role in that offense. That being said, I don't think you can go wrong either one of these guys. They're back-to-back for a reason for us. So much so that, we were doing mock drafts last night for a league that Rebo and I are in, and we were sitting at 14, and we took these guys back-to-back. Just because it's such a good, solid running back tandem that you're not worried about them either way. I'm actually going to let Adam or Lionel Frankenstein, as we call him, take number 7, just because I know he is the biggest Kyron fan I've ever met.
And also, you want 8.
I do want 8.
You can gladly
That is
have
true.
8.
That is
you
true.
can have
I do
8
want 8.
all you want, buddy.
That is
because
true.
I get to talk about my guy, Kyron Williams. Earlier, I talked about how I don't know how to scout running backs because I don't. But Kyron Williams was a guy that I was in on very early in the process, and it took him some time in the league. He had to get acclimated to life in the NFL. But boy, oh boy, did Sean McVay find a way to use him last year. And did he use him? Kyron got so much volume that it was unfair. He partially broke fantasy football. Christian McCaffrey demolished it, and then Kyron just kind of followed in his wake, But I'm really excited to see what Kyron Williams can do again this year. I am a little bit nervous about the Blake Corum draft pick, but not all that much. It's just put a pin in it. Think about it later.
True.
Because I still, at the end of the day, this is Kyron's show. The offense is going to flow through Kyron Williams. Blake Corum, I don't think, poses much of a threat to Kyron. I think it would be fine there.
Yeah, last year was the first year in what feels like 10 that the running back situation in Los Angeles was one guy. They've been a by committee team for so long, and it's kind of interesting to think that they drafted a guy like Blake Corum that has proven in college that he's one of the best running backs out there. Do they go back to a tandem? Also, you get a healthy Cooper Kupp for the entire year. He came back and worked a little bit last year, but he said it himself he wasn't fully healthy. And so I feel like that might be a detriment to Kyron a little bit. He also got a whole lot of goal line touches because as electric as the offense passing game was for the Rams, they just wouldn't put it in the end zone, and so Kyron just got easy touchdowns. But yeah, nothing taken away from Kyron. Great running back. I will be glad if he's on my team.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to score points. The Rams used him like a workhorse last year, and he scored every touchdown he could. So Kyron's upside is through the roof. But I really do want to talk about number 8 because he was a guy who I traded for in our Dynasty League because I saw some potential out of him, and it boomed. Ended up as running back 3 last season, Travis Etienne in the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, he's very, like, I'm not going to say he's the same player as some guys higher on the list like Jameer or Bijan, but if you look at their games, they have the same capabilities. Etienne was drafted to a team that had James Robinson at running back when James Robinson was viewed as one of the better backs in the league. Everybody was kind of confused. Why do they use a first-round pick on a running back when they already have a guy who's really good? And then Etienne comes out and shows us exactly why they spent a first-round pick on him last season. Was a fantastic player for fantasy football. High-volume player, scored touchdowns, received the ball, and he's on a team that kind of needs an identity. I wouldn't say the Jaguars necessarily have an offensive identity right now, although you just paid Trevor Lawrence a ton of money. You have Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk as the top 2 receivers on that team with BT Cruiser, Brian Thomas coming in as a rookie. So there's a lot of big question marks on that team, and I think if you have a question mark and you have a top 10 running back on your team, let him cook. And I think that's what they're going to do with Travis Etienne. I think, he may not be as big of a boom as he was last season, but he's still a really darn good player who's going to get you some wins in fantasy football.
Yeah, with these last 6 guys on our list, I feel like a lot of them are just like sure bets, but of any one of those guys that I'm willing to bet that they're going to boom this year, it's probably Travis Etienne. He's got the stars are kind of aligning for him. Not many wide receivers that have worked as a wide receiver 1 in the past or in the room with him, and so they're going to probably have to default to a great run game, and he's also a great pass catcher. Proved that last year.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it right on the head with the Travis Etienne needs to be the identity of the offense. I mean, there's not much that I really trust with that Jaguars offense. Obviously, I haven't seen much from my eyes out of Trevor Lawrence, but I don't get paid to make the decisions. The people in Jacksonville do, and that's why they handed him a whole bunch of money. Maybe they know something we don't, but just watching Trevor Lawrence orchestrate the offense, I don't know if that's going to win you a whole lot of games, so it's going to have to come down to an elite superstar.
So I get Old Man Henry.
Oh, the king.
The old man and the Ravens. Isn't that what Ernest Hemingway said?
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, there's 2 guys in fantasy football and in the NFL that just defy the odds. Christian McCaffrey being a little bit older and Derrick Henry being very old for the running back position. Still dominant last year. I believe that the Ravens are kind of suit him a little bit better offensive line than the Titans had last year, and we've seen what Derrick Henry can do with great offensive lines. It's just he has very little pass reception upside.
Acumen.
Yeah.
Acumen.
Oh, was that your word of the day calendar?
Word of the day.
Let's go.
Acumen.
And so that's the one drawback from Derrick Henry, but he's a workhorse back, and we've seen Lamar Jackson even lose a little weight coming into the season, being he doesn't have to push that extra yard because he knows he has Derrick Henry behind him.
Yeah. I mean, Derrick Henry guaranteed 12 touchdowns. You saw what Gus Edwards did in that offense, and there is no denying that Derrick Henry is a better player than Gus Edwards. If somebody claims that Gus Edwards had a better fit into that scheme, it just makes no sense. Derrick Henry and the Ravens have been a match made in heaven the past few seasons, and we finally get to see it. Although he is getting up there in age, I think while he doesn't have maybe the yardage that he did in past seasons, maybe he sticks, below the 4 figures. he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. And if you have a guy who's almost a guarantee to get a touchdown every week, you put him in your lineup.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Derrick Henry, it's the same conversation that we had for a second there with Jonathan Taylor and Saquon, where you best believe that quarterback is going to get a whole lot of rushing yards. It takes away opportunities from Derrick Henry. But over the years, especially the last few, I've learned to never doubt Derrick Henry because it's Derrick Henry. Running backs should not last this long. He is not a running back. He's not a human. He is a creature. He's a yeti.
Creature. He is a creature. Yeah, Derrick Henry, great player. And then rounding us off, top 10, Isaiah Pacheco. I would say he's the least eye-grabbing name on this list, but if you were to tell me one guy on this list finished exactly where we put him, Isaiah Pacheco might be my guess for that guy.
Oh, 100%.
Because, you look at the top 9 guys, something could happen where they boom higher than we expected with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or Breece Hall. A guy falls off due to age or injury with, like CMC or Saquon. But Isaiah Pacheco feels like the most solid running back 9 to running back 12 in the league because the Chiefs were willing to change kind of their offensive philosophy based on what they've done in the past. It wasn't Patrick Mahomes throwing 45 times a game and throwing 78 deep balls. It was let our defense handle the game. Let's play smart, and let's give the ball to our young, tough running back because he plays like he's got something to prove. And, he was a 7th-round pick a couple of years ago, ends up being the Super Bowl winning running back, and then last season showed even more potential, and I think he'll just continue to grow based on what he's already done, and he has a high touchdown potential. He plays harder than almost anybody in the league. I mean, he stomps his foot in the ground like it stole his money. So Isaiah Pacheco's, I think, a really solid player, and I wouldn't mind getting him on my squad.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of room for him to basically repeat what exactly happened last year. I mean, the Chiefs' offense, they added a few pieces. You got Travis Kelce, who's entering the twilight of his career. He's stepped down a little bit last year. I would imagine we see another slight regress from him just getting up in age. And in the receiver room, we're waiting to see what happens with Rashee Rice. Obviously, he could miss 4 games, could miss half the season. Depends on what the NFL decides to do. Hollywood Brown is an upgrade over some of the names they had in there last year, but not a tremendous one. Not one that really should strike a whole lot of fear in defenses' hearts. But then they had Xavier Worthy also. Again, a rookie receiver. I think he's talented, but do you really want to put all your eggs in a rookie basket that, from Xavier Worthy? So I think Pacheco is just going to continue to just chug along and end up at running back 10.
Yeah, I mean, we have brought up our Dynasty League a couple times, and these last 2 running backs are on mine, thankfully. And from a proud owner of his Isaiah Pacheco stock, it's great to see him score 12 to 18 points consistently. And I think that's the one big thing Isaiah Pacheco brings to your fantasy football team is consistency. He's not very much of a boom player, but he will never bust.
I mean, yeah, we talked about it on the last episode, and it continues to ring true, is that team build matters when you're picking these guys. Just because we have a guy like, Jahmyr Gibbs higher than Saquon, if you're really looking for a boom prospect, go Jahmyr. But if you need a guy who you think is going to be more consistent and is going to bring you some points every single week, go with a guy like Saquon. So, these rankings aren't finalized. Obviously, we have a long time before the football season starts, but this is where we're at right now, and we'll continue to move along on fantasy. Before this episode ends, of course, we're going to do our overrated and sleepers. I started last time, so if somebody else wants to start, go for it. We'll start with our sleeper candidate at the running back position.
All right, yeah, I'll take the bait. I'll go here. My underrated sleeper player is Ken Walker. another dynasty asset of mine.
I love Ken Walker.
Oh, fun game we're playing here because mine's
is.
also a dynasty asset of mine.
Oh, let's go. Should we just turn this into a dynasty episode?
Mine
no,
is
'cause I have
not.
Derrick Henry.
Mine is not one of my dynasty players.
Oh, you had to ruin the fun. That's okay.
Have you seen my dynasty running back room? I ain't naming any of those guys.
That's. But yeah, I think Ken Walker's gonna have a really nice season. Like I mentioned earlier, it's gonna be the season of the youth movement, the changing of the guards. I think Ken Walker's gonna be a part of that, along with some of those top names up there with Bijan and Brees. Last year, the major question mark surrounding Ken Walker was the addition of Zach Charbonnet, and Charbonnet did very little to really establish himself and solidify any confidence in his ability to take over the backfield from Ken Walker. I think this is still going to be the Ken Walker show. We'll see what a Geno Smith offense I think this is year 3 of the Geno Smith experience, what it looks like.
New OC?
They did get a new OC.
Ryan
This is true.
Grubb.
Ryan Grubb from Washington, which I don't know necessarily what that means for Ken Walker.
I don't
just
know if
because,
it means anything.
because they had a 2 running back system, but I don't think either one of those running backs were as good of a talent as Ken Walker is. So maybe Ryan Grubb will adapt his system to fit Kenneth Walker rather than Kenneth Walker adapting his game to fit the system. But I'm a huge Kenneth Walker guy too. I absolutely love him. Right now his ADP is at 4.11, so he's going very close to that 4.5 turn. And if you're telling me I'm sitting there at the bottom of the 4th round and Kenneth Walker's there, I'm pressing that button so fast.
Yeah, I mean puts me like RB16. So I think Ken Walker has as much chance as anyone to land. I think he could land inside the top 5. I'm expecting a big season from Ken Walker.
Yeah.
Maybe top 8.
I mean, it's hard to say anything about a Seahawks player just because I feel like it's so dependent on, like, all parts of their offense have to be good in order for an individual to be good, and it's been proven 2 seasons in a row now. 2 seasons ago, Geno Smith and the boys were killing it, and they were all eating. This past season, Ken Walker was doing great at the beginning, got a little nicked up, slowed down his progression, and frankly, I would not want to have had either wide receiver last year. Also, me and you drafted Geno Smith last year, and that was miserable.
Very true. He did not finish the year on our team. Luckily, we drafted a very good backup quarterback who ended up as a top 10 quarterback, and Jared Goff. So we were lucky there. But yeah, the Seahawks are kind of an anomaly when it comes to fantasy football. We have no idea what to expect out of them.
So onto my guy, the Zach Moss.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
There has never been a man who talked more about a fantasy football prospect 3 months out from the draft than Rebo Hustle has about Zach Moss.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking from a pure touches perspective, Zach Moss going to the Bengals have had Joe Mixon finish in the top 10 the past 6 seasons probably.
Yeah, it
I don't
feels
know.
that
I
way.
don't know if that's fact or not, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
And so just the amount of vacated touches, Chase Brown didn't look too hot last year. Also, Zach Moss was the most efficient running back last year out of the shotgun formation, which, by the way, the Bengals love to do.
This man did his research.
Great stat. Love it, Rebo.
I love Zach Moss.
He does love Zach Moss.
Also, the fantasy footballers hate to love Zach Moss, and so that's where I got my stats
It
from.
is incredible. I mean, it was a complete surprise last year seeing Zach Moss kind of pop off. I mean, we'll see if he can do the same thing this year.
He went from Bills outcast to best running back in the league through 6 weeks to filling the role of one of the best running backs in the past decade in Joe Mixon. So he's had a weird career trajectory for only being like 26 or whatever he is. But yeah, Zach Moss, I mean, he's going right now at the early 20s as far as running backs go. I think they're putting him in the 6th or 7th round. So, you know, Zach Moss being a starting running back on a team who you're sure is going to score a lot of points, that's what you want. You want running backs on offenses that are going to score points because they have more opportunities and, you know, late in games, they'll get more touches because their team already scored so much. Rebo Hustle, you look very concerned right now. Can you give us the breakdown?
His ADP in a 12-team league is 801. Like
Yeah,
if Zach Moss is my running back 3, like I'm sprinting down the street naked.
Clip that. Yeah, I mean, he's not making past me in the 7th, let alone make it into the 8th. So Zach Moss.
I'm okay with him starting. Like that's how confident I am in Zach Moss. I'm okay with him being a running back 2 if you're taking a onesie or maybe even 2 onesies, and you have a good running back 1. There's no problem with Zach Moss being a running back 2. You know at least he's going to be Isaiah Pacheco's level.
Okay, I like it. So we've talked about Zach Moss. We've talked about Ken Walker. I'm going to talk about somebody closer to home, a guy who is looking for a contract extension and plays for the team represented right behind us, and that's Alvin Kamara. We missed him at the beginning of the season last year, but once he found his footing last season, once he started playing, Derek Carr dumped that ball off to Alvin Kamara more than any quarterback has ever done. I think there was one game where he had like 13 receptions for like 30 yards.
It was beautiful.
And turned out to be the running back 2 on that week or something.
And we lost to Paul that week.
Yeah, we did.
But my other dynasty team was very thankful, so appreciate it, Alvin.
I mean, the receiving element alone from Alvin Kamara, he averages something like 70 receptions per year. That's on the level of wide receiver 2s in the NFL. I think Alvin Kamara not only brings that rushing upside, but we've seen games where he pops off for 3, 4. I mean, he had the game on Christmas where he had 6 touchdowns. So he brings everything that you want out of a running back. And my biggest point to drive home with AK-41 is that Clint Kubiak is now the OC.
Oh, yes he
sir.
is.
He has been on the 49ers. He was the passing game coordinator, if I remember correctly. Yep. And what we've seen out of Saints training camp or rookie mini camp or OTAs, whatever you want to call it so far, is he is not afraid of motion. And if there's one thing I know Alvin Kamara can do, it's draw the eyes of the defense. Chris Olave has been taking snaps out of the backfield. You have Kendre Miller, who should be back and healthy, who can take some pressure off of him. And you have an offensive system that revolves around the same ideals that the 49ers offense did with Christian McCaffrey, who came in the same class as Alvin Kamara. And to be frank, for the first few years, they were neck and neck as to who's the better player. So I think Kamara's in for a great season. I know he's getting up there in age as well, but if you told me Kamara finished inside the top 10 this season, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, personally, I think I have him at running back 9, so I'm really big on AK-41 this season.
Yeah, we kind of do a collective, but just between me and Redfish here. And I believe he is running back 9 for us. One thing this offseason that kind of got my ears perked up a little bit is a lot of people have been referring to Clint Kubiak's offense as wide zone. And I think that there's no better scheme for Alvin Kamara to be a workhorse in than wide zone. Just his ability to get to the outside, see cutback angles, things like that. And also, I mean, it's like either that or a pro-style offense, and that's Alvin Kamara's bread and butter.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a power inside zone, nothing like that. He's not a big beefy guy, but if you get him on the outside, he'll make you miss, and we've seen that so many times before.
Oh,
yeah.
For sure. I mean, he's heavily discounted in drafts right now, largely because of the age and because of the contract situation. If that contract can get squared away, Alvin Kamara's primed for a top-tier season.
Yeah,
Could be one of his best.
He's currently going right after Ken Walker. Their ADP is right around each other at that 4 or 5 turn.
Yeah.
And if you told me my running backs in the 4th, 5th, and 7th round were Ken Walker, Alvin Kamara, and Zach Moss, I'm coming out of that draft happy. So yeah. I love all 3 of our guys.
With Pete Carmichael out the door and the archaic offense that the Saints ran gone, the Clint Kubiak time.
Pete Carmichael.
Throwback to when
our sound check
Mustang lived with us.
Our sound check used to be Pete Carmichael.
That was the sound check.
Okay, I'm
good
glad
times.
I now know that inside joke.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely turn that into a bit. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what the new Saints offense can do this upcoming season.
All right, overrated. Who you got, Rebo?
Easy. Josh Jacobs switched over to the Green Bay Packers. I cannot see a world where the Green Bay Packers just go, oh, we have Josh Jacobs now. A.J. Dillon, sit the bench. Also, new rookie running back that I am forgetting your name right now, sit the bench.
That's the point I wanted to talk about because I knew you were going to talk about Josh Jacobs. Matt LaFleur has never been one to use one running back. It was Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon for, the past 4 seasons?
And the only thing that set Aaron Jones apart was when Aaron Rodgers was in town dumping the ball off in the passing game. That is not Josh Jacobs' game.
And he was a more dynamic, efficient player. And that is the opposite of what Josh Jacobs is. Josh Jacobs is more similar to an A.J. Dillon where he gets his touches off of big power runs, volume, and touchdowns. I don't think A.J. Dillon will play a role in this offense at all, if we're being honest, because I think Marshawn Lloyd, the guy you were thinking about, the USC running back, is going to come in and take a lot of snaps away, not only from A.J. Dillon, but I think he's going to impede on Josh Jacobs as well. I really like Marshawn Lloyd. I think he's a really good player. I think they invested in him for a reason. And then not only that, but Josh Jacobs is going at the 211 right now. He's going as the running back 10 in most leagues. I'm not touching Josh Jacobs at running back 10 with a 10-foot pole, and I'm certainly not taking him in the second round. There's probably 16 or 17 guys I would take above Josh Jacobs right now.
Reebo's got something to say here.
So his average position, 211.
Mm-hmm.
Travis Etienne's average position, 209.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
no. Etienne is head and shoulders above where Josh Jacobs is. It's not. I'm not saying Josh Jacobs is some scrub player. Like, he's a good, decent running back too, but he should not be touching the level at which people are drafting him.
Fantasy football drafters are kind of betting on the guy who led the league in rushing, and that's what we bet on last year when we took him. But, I mean, this is a different scheme. Sure, there is upside to Josh Jacobs, but you can't bet on upside when you need a running back 1. Like, that's got to be a guy that can do it, but can potentially boom. Yep. Like our top 4, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah,
10.
no, I'm in no way in on Josh Jacobs, especially not he was running back 10.
Based on ADP, he's going as the running back 10.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not in on Josh Jacobs at all. If you can somehow get him at a discounted price, maybe he falls a few rounds. I am interested to see what he looks like in a different offense, because last year was, I feel like, just a weird year all around for the Raiders. The offense was just not clicking at all at any point in the season, and he missed part of training camp. So I'm wondering if maybe he can rekindle anything from his monster season 2 years ago. Hopefully that's not just an outlier season.
Yeah, so projections, I mean, nobody really cares what other people say the projections are, but on this app, last year's stats, he had 6 rushing touchdowns, 0 receiving touchdowns, 54 targets, only 37 receptions. They're giving him more touchdowns in the rushing game, more touchdowns in the passing game, more yards, more opportunities, and he's still running back 12 or lower. And so they're projecting on his upside, and he's still
falling outside of where people are drafting him.
Yes.
Right. I'm with you. Josh Jacobs, a little bit overdrafted right now.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and I'll keep it pretty brief because we've talked a good bit already about this player. But my overrated player, and it's not really overrated, it's more just let's throw some caution in there, is Saquon Barkley.
We hate Eagles.
Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just anti-Eagles.
No, I did mine last week with Jalen Brown and Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Brown.
Hey,
NBA
Finals
champion.
MVP.
We hate anyone who runs in Philadelphia, including Rocky. But, so it's more just caution. Can we pull up his ADP real quick?
Sure.
I just want to see where he's going. I think it's in the second round.
Currently, Saquon Barkley's ADP is 202.
202, yeah. So at 202, I mean, you're passing up on elite wide receivers.
He's being drafted as the running back 7.
Can you give me some wide receiver names that are around Maybe like right after Saquon. I'll do a
So
little game
right
here.
around there. Would you take this guy or Saquon? Garrett Wilson,
Garrett Wilson.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
I'm anti-rookie receivers, so I'm going to go Saquon. But,
Devontae Adams.
This is a risky part of the draft, if we're being honest.
These are, I'm naming the guys who are like 110 to 203.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
There's a risky corner on the comeback, and it's like, what's...
But I'm guessing we have Olave around here.
Yeah. Olave's going at
Jalen
205. Waddle is
a little
in the
further
third
down.
round.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk about him next week. I guarantee that. But Adams, Puka Nakua. Who you're a big
so
fan
I'm
of, you
taking
take
Puka over
right.
Saquon.
Yeah.
I'm taking
And then-
Olave over Saquon. I'm expecting big
Garrett
things from Olave,
Wilson.
but that's a discussion for next week.
Yeah.
That's not to say I'm out on Saquon. If the board falls a certain way, Saquon's on my team. But just throw a little caution in there. Watch out for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, same thing with my take for Jalen Hurts last week. Like, I've drafted 80 mock drafts since the last time I was on this podcast, and I've had Jalen Hurts in at least 30 of them.
Yeah. It's just you don't want to
How the
make
board
expectations too high.
Yeah, it's just how the board falls, and if we're being honest, both of those guys are going to take away from each other's game. No matter what happens, a little bit is going to get shaved off of either one of them.
I agree. And then my overrated guy is actually right below Saquon on our list, and that's Kyron Williams.
I'm done. This podcast is over.
I don't think he's overrated in the sense that he's a bad player. I'm not saying you shouldn't draft him. Just kind of like you said, just be cautious. I think it has to do a lot with the history of the Rams. I mean, the last time we've seen a guy dominate was Todd Gurley, and then within 2 years, he was basically out of the NFL. Then you had, Sony Michel come in. He was supposed to be the guy. Darrell Henderson was supposed to be their guy. I mean, who else was there? I feel like there was maybe one other guy who came in, and it was like, okay, this is the guy that they found, and he's gonna work. Cam Akers.
Yeah, I was
Cam
going to win a
Akers
championship
is
for them.
the guy. So it feels like there's this never-ending cycle. But to be fair, Kyron Williams is better than all three of those guys I just named.
Absolutely.
Just in 1 year, you can see that. However, just be cautious. They were the first team to take a running back off the board in Blake Corum. So you have to be mindful of the draft capital that they use on him. You don't draft a guy as high as they did and not have a plan. Kyron also hasn't always been known to be the healthiest guy. So you do have to kind of wonder about soft tissues or, different little injuries like that. And then the touchdown production, I feel, is not repeatable. I feel like Kyron Williams put way too many touchdowns on the board last season for what he can do again, because I think Blake Corum will get some goal line touches. Matthew Stafford is back in that offensive, and if he stays all season, I think the receiving core is going to go up a little bit, which would bring down that run game. I feel like Kyron was leaned on because of the Stafford injury. So if Stafford stays healthy, we may see some pressure taken off of Kyron. That being said, I wouldn't have him at like running back 15. That's not what I'm saying. I think if you have him at that running back 10 to 11 range, that's a really good spot for him. ADP wise, he's going at 201, so he's actually one spot above Saquon. He's going about 8 spots in front of Travis Etienne, and he's a whole round ahead of guys like Isaiah Pacheco and Derrick Henry. So for me, I don't think he's a bad player by any means. I would still love to have Kyron on my team, but I feel like his ADP at the moment is just a little too rich for all the question marks I have.
Yeah, there's some certainly valid question marks. The Blake Corum thing, I guess I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into it because I was burned by the Charbonnet Ken Walker conversation last year, where Charbonnet was a highly drafted, highly touted prospect coming into the league, and it didn't really seem to matter. He didn't do that much on the field to really push into Ken Walker's target or share of the offense. So I wonder if that's the same deal we have with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams here.
And that's fair. I just think Blake Corum's a better player than Zach Charbonnet was, and I think for me, him being it stands to reason that he was the first running back off the board in the draft. That means a lot to me. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a team situation, but the fact that they got a national championship running back who is kind of the same mold as Kyron, undersized, heavier, bigger, stronger goal line backs. And I don't know. I'm just putting caution on it.
Yeah, I mean we touched on earlier a full healthy season of Cooper Kupp can also affect him a little bit. But my biggest thing with the Blake Corum conversation is versus the Ken Walker conversation is the head coach. Sean McVay, I don't think has ever done anything without a purpose.
Right.
And I think Sean McVay has a plan for Blake Corum. I literally watched them draft him the other day, like on YouTube, and he was like, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with Kyron. He's excited about it." And so obviously there's going to be a little bit of a tandem going on. And so like that's why I have him below Saquon, who we know is at least going to be a workhorse back. Not much competition there, but still a guy that you can swing on as your running back one for sure.
I think Bryce just picked Kyron as his overrated guy because of his notorious Notre Dame hate.
Not true. If you listen to the podcast last season, I was high on Notre Dame. I was actually somewhat of a Notre Dame fan last season.
But
Notre
deep
Dame
down inside, it's rooted in there.
Kyron Williams could have went to San Diego State, and I'd be saying the same thing about him, man. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying you should avoid him at all costs.
Your antenna should be up.
You just have to pay attention. And, of course, we're recording all of this before training camps start. We're recording this in the middle of June.
You didn't have to say it.
And training camps don't start for another month.
We've looked into the crystal balls.
So, half these guys could come out to be in the best shape of their life, and they're going to have the best season of all time. And some of them could be, their snaps are getting taken away by their backup. So we don't know for sure. However, those are just the guys we want to look at. Our top 10, as well as some guys who aren't on the list who may make it on their way. Or guys who are on the list who maybe we have a little bit lower in our personal rankings. So if you enjoyed this, which we hope you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe here on YouTube. Make sure to follow us on X at @offthE_dome_pod, as well as follow the No Network at Be in the Know, KNEAUX, the only way to spell it. A ton of good stuff going on there, YouTube as well. We do interviews all the time with Louisiana athletes. LSU players. We've done some Saints guys. We've done former LSU, current LSU. So it's a lot of fun to be a part of the No Network, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of the OTD crew. So we really hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, make sure to look forward to our wide receiver rankings that'll come out next week. Top 10 wide receivers, where I'm sure we'll have more hot takes. So if you enjoyed this content, make sure to check out our wide receiver rankings. We'll drop next week. Top 10 wide receivers for fantasy football next season. We're really excited about it. We hope you are too. I am Redfish.
I'm Lionel Frankenstein.
And I'm Rebo Hustle.
And we will see you next time.